Hello, hello, hello. Hi. Why, hello there. Would you like to learn more about the 80s synth pop duo Strawberry Switchblade, known for their unique style and polka dotted fashion? Well, if you do, then keep on watching. So, I do want to give a little. I'm sorry for, disappearing for a little bit. Okay, maybe more than a little bit. But I'm back. I can't make any promises that I won't disappear again because I'm a fashion student and life is really busy, but I do apologize. But I do want to film more. This video has been my number one priority for a long time. If you know me, you know I've been non-stop talking about this because this band means the absolute world to me. I love them. They're my special interest. I don't want to yap too much, so I'm just gonna show my outfit and then we'll get on to the video. Let me stand up and show you. So this is the outfit. I did my hair, I did my makeup, I did the outfit. With my own little strawberry switchblade twist, as you can tell. So, before I begin, I do want to give a little disclaimer that this video will be mentioning some pretty triggering topics such as these. So if you don't think you're in a mental place for that, then please do just click out of this video. Your mental health is so much more important than learning about this band. You can find the information pretty easily online and maybe avoid triggering some stuff because I am going to be getting into details about their lives, and there is just certain things that happened that can be triggering, and I will be talking about them. Another little disclaimer I do want to mention is that I can't promise every little bit of information is accurate, especially since there is a lot of he said, she said in this. It's a lot of word of mouth, but my number one source for this that I do want to give a shout out to is the Strawberry Switchblade fan site. Please do check it out. Everything on there is so organized. The interviews, everything. You can even find pictures you haven't seen before. They also have an Instagram and a YouTube. Please do check them out. Just credit to them. They were not my only source, but they were by far my most helpful source. Also, their YouTube has so many good demos and other tracks that I hadn't heard before. So good. There's so many unreleased tracks that you guys need to check out. So yeah, do check them out. It's just the Strawberry Switchblade fan site, I think. I'll insert the name here. And yeah, I'll also put them in the description, the links. So yeah, first I'm going to give a little introduction to the band. So Strawberry Switchblade was a short-lived band formed in the 80s. They only released one album and a few singles. They were especially popular in Japan and then of course London, Glasgow, where they're from, Glasgow, Scotland. They have a unique synth poppy sound, and they were a duo of Rose McDowall and Jill Bryson. They often sported polka dots, upside down cat eyes, flowers in their hair, and ribbons. Those were the main things for their style. They are pretty niche for the most part, but the people that know them do love them. They did have an influence on the Gothic Lolita style, it would seem, which is so cool. I was into Gothic Lolita before I was even into this band. Such a cool little detail. They also blew up a little bit on TikTok with their song Trees and Flowers. That's pretty cool. Also, I want to clear up a misconception now. They're not goth. I adore them with my entire being, but they are not goth. They are new wave synth pop, new romantic, not goth. I know that some people might misconstrue it, and some people will literally just be like goths and then the music they listen to. A lot of goths listen to them. They influence the style in a lot of ways, but they are not goth. Their music is not goth. If you're looking for goth music, I am thinking of doing a video on goth music recommendations, but you could just check out my Spotify, listing my special playlist in the description. You should check it out. I don't want to yap too long, but just they're not goth. I love them, but they're not goth. They are new wave synth pop. But yeah, anyway, I do just want to say a little more stuff about the band, that they were very short-lived. They only lasted for a couple of years, in terms of their popularity, and they did have a top 5 hit in the UK. So that's a little introduction to them. So let's get into some other stuff now. Now let's get on to talking about Rose McDowall, aka Rose Porter. So, Rose Mary Porter was born on October 21st, 1959 at the Duke Street Hospital in Glasgow, Scotland, to a large, poor Catholic family. As the oldest of 7 children, Rose grew up listening to lots of 60s music because of her dad, who was really into that kind of music. Her biggest influence in music was her dad, and when she was 18 months old, he even taught her how to jive. He would sing all day long and had lots of 60s and 50s records. Music quickly became a big part of her life. It would be her happy button in a way, where she could be having a horrible day, but listen to some music and it would instantly cheer her up. Rose's father was a coal man, and one of her first jobs was actually helping him around the coal round. And she was a bit of a tomboy growing up. She even did karate, which was a big hobby of hers when she was younger. Which is, an interesting contrast considering the styles that she would, wear when she was a little bit older. So when the career officer came to her school and asked everyone what they wanted to do when they were older, everyone around her said things like a nurse, nothing too ambitious. But when the career officer asked Rose, she said she wanted to be a brain surgeon or a pop star. She did mean more of a psychologist due to her interest in the human mind, but she never would have guessed that when she was older, maybe her pop star dream would have come true. But as we know, Strawberry Switchblade. But yeah. Rose was 10 years old when her family moved to an especially violent area of Glasgow in the late 60s, early 70s. Before her family moved, they lived in a house called 10 James Orr Street. This was her favorite place that she had ever lived, and she did not want to leave. But they were tearing down this house and some other houses around the area to extend the Glasgow Royal Infirmary, so her family really had no choice but to leave. The place in Glasgow that the Porter family would move was incredibly violent and like a nightmare. She hated this new place that they moved, and looking back, 10 James Orr Street just felt like the perfect place. Keep this in mind for later. Before moving to this new area, Rose had seen the world as a beautiful place, and she was innocent and naive, just a little kid. But within 6 months of moving, her outlook on life would completely change. Her family moved to a tenement where there were 6 families, and only her family and the one below her were not involved with the police. Within 6 months of moving, when Rose was 11 and her little brother was only 6 years old, they were walking home, and on their way back, a group of guys grabbed her little brother. 2 guys held one of his arms while another guy kicked his stomach. This happened on a Thursday, and by that Sunday, her brother had died of a ruptured appendix. A doctor was called multiple times, and it was just thought to be internal bruising though. Her brother Michael laid for days dying. Rose sat with her brother as he died, laughing as he described little men with funny hats who were coming to take him away. When Rose came back inside after threatening one of the boys who beat up her brother had passed away. She ran for 8 miles, being stopped by one of her neighbors who tried to calm her down, but she kept running until she reached her grandmother's house. She told her grandmother how her brother was sick and was freaking out, not wanting to admit that he was dead. When she got back to her house, there was an ambulance leaving. That meant her brother had passed away. This is a horrific situation that completely changed Rose's outlook on life, making her a far more cynical person. And this would change her outlook on life forever. Living in this place, Rose encountered many situations that made her more cynical and a more jaded human being overall. At 14 years old, she found a man who was dead, stabbed by a sword, and then the perpetrator chased her and her friends. Her father got hit in the head with an axe twice due to a case of mistaken identity, and dangerous things were always happening around her. Kids would set high-rise apartments on fire, people would die. A guy even stabbed his pregnant girlfriend in the stomach. Rose got mugged and assaulted a few times, and was even held at knife point. An especially horrid situation that happened to her was her cat was even killed in front of her. A boy swung her cat by the tail and set it on fire in a dustbin, as the cat would scream in terror. Disgusting and horrible, traumatizing things like this were sadly commonplace at this time in Rose's life. Living in this place was like a nightmare, and it felt like a war zone. She only lived there until she was 16 years old, but this was an incredibly gruesome place that permanently affected her, of course. She was once an optimistic child, but became guarded as she saw some of the darkest things that anyone could ever see, let alone a child. The only reason her family stayed there even was that they were such a large family and they were poor. They couldn't afford to leave. As soon as Rose was old enough to leave though, at the age of 16, she left school and went straight into working. She moved to Paisley where her boyfriend at the time lived, and she never wanted to go back. There was also a punk club nearby. Punk opened up a whole new world for Rose, and it came at the perfect time as she was just entering adulthood. Rose was always a bit of a loner. She liked to draw and listen to music, and when punk came, she finally felt validated in who she was. Despite her dangerous environment, Rose broke free and did not let that get to her. In 1976, at a punk gig, she met a man named Peter McArthur. The punk scene was very small and close-knit in this area, so everyone pretty much knew each other. Also, remember this name? The name Peter McArthur will be important for the future. Rose worked at a small cake shop called the Wee Scone Shop. All the punks in Glasgow would go and she would give out free pies. Rose and her friend Linda, who worked there, would keep Linda in mind for later too. They both got fired for having blue hair, but they were reinstated. Rose then met Drew McDowall at the Silver Thread Club in Paisley. And Rose's first musical venture was born on a night in 1977. Rose and her soon-to-be husband Drew McDowall saw the Ramones live at the Glasgow Apollo, and, well, she had a light bulb moment. Rose turned to Drew and said, "If they can do it, we can do it." They then formed the Poems in 1978 with Rose on the drums and Drew on vocals. While Rose did sing a little bit, she was mainly on drums. And then their other band member was Drew's friend Ian, who was on guitar. They didn't have a drum kit at first, so the first thing that they recorded, Rose was playing on drums on Tupperware containers with drumsticks. So authentically punk of her. I don't know, it's just like so silly to hear that, but also like, it's very punk. Rose got married and fell pregnant during this time, and she had to stop working at the cake shop. She played a gig for the Poems while she was pregnant with her daughter Carrie, and she was only 19 years old when she was pregnant and already was married. She had already lived such a life. As a 20-year-old myself, I can't even imagine that. I'm literally just a broke college student trying to make it by. But Rose Porter became Rose McDowall during this time, which is the name that we would all know her as. Punk was banned in Glasgow, so they would have to travel to go to punk events. Groups of punks would meet up to all go to a club in Paisley outside of Glasgow together, or they would have to go to Edinburgh or places like the Silver Thread Hotel in Paisley. That is all for Rose McDowall for now. Let's get on to the other half of the band, Jill Bryson. Jill Bryson was born on February 11th, 1961, in the south side of Glasgow, at Rotten Row Maternity Hospital. Born to a mother and a father, she also had a younger sister named Jane. Her mother owned a small flower shop that eventually went bankrupt, and her father was a sales manager. It is much harder to find information about Jill's childhood, but it seems that she had a pretty normal upbringing, and she was always shy and had a low self-esteem, but she always did have a love for art. Jill once worked at her mother's flower shop, which likely contributed to her love of flowers, and that would be a big part of her image and art in the future. She did eventually end up developing agoraphobia, which would become a lifelong struggle for Jill. Agoraphobia is an anxiety disorder that is a fear of open spaces like leaving your house. At the age of just 10 years old, she was at school and felt dizzy all of the time. She was taken to the doctor, and they thought she was just trying to get out of school and being a hypochondriac. Jill, though, was actually very frightened and was lightheaded in truth. And this was just the start of her agoraphobia. She would have out-of-body experience panic attacks that would make her feel like she was dying. Everything would be spinning and she wouldn't even be able to stand up. Jill missed a year of school at around the age of 14 to 15 years old due to her agoraphobia. She stayed inside and spent that time drawing, painting, and listening to music. This was just to keep herself busy since she was on her own most of the time, with her parents being at work and her sister being at school, while she was stuck at home, terrified to even go outside. During this time, she knew that she wanted to go to art school, though this seems to be something that she always did know most of her life. She was terrified of going outside, afraid she wouldn't be able to come home afterwards. Every time her father went to work, she was so sure he wouldn't come back home again. She knew it was irrational, but she felt like she was going mad. It became a cycle of depression which would bring on anxiety, and then that would trigger her agoraphobia. But then punk came along. Punk was like what cured her. She could not stay inside when there were all these cool bands playing. Her friends had slowly began encouraging her to begin going outside. Before punk, there were discos, but just the thought of those alone made Jill sick. Jill liked how friendly and open the punk community was, and Jill became inspired by punk and wanted to do it too. She wanted to go out, she wanted to scream into microphones, which not many women were doing at the time. Jill became involved in the Glasgow punk scene in 1976 to 1977. Her dad took her to one of the degree shows at the Glasgow School of Art and thought to herself, I could do that. It was when Jill was 16 years old that she began caring about what she wore. She loved the glamour of punk and began being inspired by Susie Sue, Debbie Harry, and Gay Advert. In around 1976 to 1977, Jill met Peter McArthur at a punk rocker's birthday party. Peter thought that she was a good sport because there was a food fight in the kitchen involving margarine and tomato sauce. Jill joined in on the food fight and had margarine rubbed in her hair, and this made an impression on him. Peter was 18 and Jill was 16, and they got a taxi home and he asked for her number. Jill wrote her number on a piece of chewing gum paper using her eyebrow pencil. Oh, how technology has changed! They talked for hours on the phone and arranged to meet at the Apollo where the Clash were playing. The two hit it off right at the start. He was doing a photography course at college, and Jill would pose for photographs for him, and the two would eventually begin dating. The Glasgow punk scene was a very close-knit community, so it was inevitable that one day the paths of Jill Bryson and Rose McDowall would one day cross. And that they did. The name Peter McArthur should sound familiar from earlier. Well, Rose McDowall and Peter had been friends for around 6 months before Jill and Peter had even met. Since Rose and Peter were friends, Rose and Jill briefly knew each other, though they never did get super close. Neither of these girls knew at the time that they would create an iconic and influential band. By 1979, punk was dead, and this was the time that Rose met Drew. And then all 4 of them lost touch for a bit. Jill began studying at the Glasgow School of Art in 1979, being very inspired by pop art and having an obsession with polka dots. After her initial foundation year, Jill studied for 3 further years at the school in the mixed media department, graduating with her mixed media degree in 1983. Jill did experiments in the early 80s, combining performance art with fashion. Her work contained lots of polka dots, black and white, and parasols being common imagery. She experimented with patterns a lot in her work. She combined fashion, music, and theater in all of her work, having a very unique punk vision in her performances. By around 1980, Rose and Jill came back into Jill and Peter's lives. Rose and Drew were now married with a daughter named Carrie. The two couples then began spending more time together and got closer. Rose and Jill began going out together and became locally famous for their unique and bold polka dot style that Jill had began developing. Though Rose always did dress pretty out there too. Rose had begun to adopt Jill's style though a bit more, and they further developed it together. Before the two girls even started a band, many people often assumed that they were in one due to their style. When Rose's band The Poems played a gig with the band Orange Juice, James Kirk, a member of the band, and Rose were on a bus together going back to Rose and Drew's apartment in Darnley. James began telling Rose about a fanzine he had planned, but he planned to scrap it. This fanzine was called Strawberry Switchblade, but Rose couldn't believe how great this name was and told him, "You've gotta do it," and that he shouldn't let this great name go to waste, but James told her, "Have it." Rose immediately was in awe and she couldn't believe it. She kept saying, "Really? Really?" She was so excited. The name of the fan sign had been inspired by the psychedelic band Strawberry Alarm Clock, but with James Kirk's punk twist on it. Despite already being in a band, hearing this name, she thought it was so perfect for a band that she decided she wanted to specifically start a girl band. One time, when Jill and Peter came to Rose and Drew's flat, Jill and Rose sat in Rose's bedroom and began looking through ribbons and things. And Rose told her about the band idea. Jill was on board with the idea instantly and wanted to join. This was the start of the iconic band, though at the time the girls surely never knew just how much this would change their lives. The band's name would truly make sense with their colorful image while their minds were dark. Their bright image mixed with lyrics about things like nuclear war, you heard me, and agoraphobia. With some extra planning, they knew that they wanted to add more members, but they were certain they did not want any guys. The thought of that never even crossed their minds. Soon enough, they found 2 more people to join Strawberry Switchblade. These other 2 members would be Carol McGowan and Janice Goodlett. Rose met Janice through clubs, and she could play the bass well. Jill knew Carol a little bit since she was the leader of the Women's Student Union. Carol's brother taught her the drums, but her abilities were limited. Also, Carol sadly passed away in 2012, so rest in peace. That is so sad. None of them knew each other very well, but still started the band. With Rose on lead vocals and rhythm guitar, Jill was on backing vocals and lead guitar, while Janice was on bass and Carol was on drums. They would just plug things in and make noise together, as Jill said, and that it was a great time. They had a lot of fun. This was the start of Strawberry Switchblade. Rose bought herself a 12-string guitar and taught herself a few chords, while Jill had no prior musical experience besides shouting into a microphone a few times. She got a classic acoustic guitar and used a How to Learn Guitar book. All of them had pretty limited abilities, though. And Peter McArthur became the band's photographer, and he's responsible for a lot of the photos of the band that are out there. So check out his work, because he's really talented. Because I look back on so many of the pictures, and they play with light and everything in such interesting ways. Naively, though, the band managed to get their first gig very quickly. They were only together for 3 months, and they had to write songs for the gig, because they got the gig before they even finished writing their songs. They only had written a few songs, so they had to rush to write enough for the gig. The band had their first gig at the Spaghetti Factory in Glasgow in December of 1981. They managed to have 6 songs written for this gig. Rose had written some lyrics the night before and had to read them out of a copybook while she was on stage. It was snowing that night and nobody could come since the buses were off. Hardly anyone was even at this gig. And for the gig, there was a tiny stage in the corner where Rose stood and the rest of them stood on the floor in the front. The band slowly began doing little gigs around Glasgow. Rose and Jill would write songs together, and Jill would come up with a tune and sing a melody to Rose, and then Rose would write the lyrics, and then they'd sing it to the band, and they'd play along. The 2 managed to work very well together writing. They would bounce ideas off of each other and be excited and enthusiastic as they created songs. There was lots of laughs and fun along the way. Their process was electric, enthusiasm bouncing off one another. For a lot of their songs, it would be Jill who created the melodies and wrote the music, while Rose would write the lyrics. It's just so nice to hear about the creative process, since a lot of the time it's just a lot more fun as any sort of artist, which includes music, to just bounce your ideas off of each other, because when you have more than one person, there's so much more creativity flowing since there's more than one of you, and that's how so many of the best ideas come to be, as seen from this. For their process of outfits and the their clothes would be from charity shops, and there was a lot of DIY elements, since the punk scene. DIY was kind of required, since these clothes weren't you couldn't find these clothes anywhere, you had to make them. So you'd have to get normal clothes and then make them your own, which is so punk, and I hate that that part of the subculture seems to be dying. It really did show their punk roots though, and they would often get weird looks from people, and people would call them things like Christmas trees, which is crazy. They don't look like Christmas trees, they just look cutesy with their bows and flowers. Crazy, I don't understand that. They would plan a theme for the day and be like, oh, the theme is red and black today. And then they would get together and throw everything that they had in that theme on the floor, which included beads, jewelry, earrings, really anything that would be red and black. And then they would split it evenly between them, putting everything on, so then they would be jangling everywhere that they went. People would hear them before they even saw them, which is so real. I jingle all the time. You know that, like, I think it's like Coco Chanel who said that, like, oh, take off an accessory before you leave. No, I add an accessory before I leave. That's my mindset, and I think that was theirs too. Rose would often have performances one after the other, getting paid for both. It would be drumming for the poems, and then she would be doing the vocals in Strawberry Switchblade. She would have to do quick changes of outfits, but they weren't that different since it was the polka dots for Strawberry Switchblade and then black frilly things for the poems. It would not be long before the band would go from a 4-piece to a 2-piece. As soon as the band started to get busy by around the middle of 1982, it would then just be Rose and Jill. Carol and Janice did not perform very many gigs with the band, and the band was only together as a 4-piece for around 9 months before downsizing. The band sat down, and Rose and Jill said, "We really want to concentrate on the band now. Practice more, do more gigs." And they had to ask the other 2 girls, "Would you be willing to give up your job if we got really busy?" Jill was in art school and had 1 more year left, and she was willing to give it up if needed, though that would be a last resort. While the other 2 were not willing to give things up. Between Carol and Janice, who were a teacher and one studying to be a marine biologist, the band simply wasn't at the top of their priorities. So Strawberry Switchblade would go from 4 to 2. The band did do a 1982 4-piece demo at Glasgow's Hellfire Studio with the songs Spanish Song, which is also known as Don't Go, Trees and Flowers, which, blew up on the internet a little bit, and Seaside, aka Go Away. Trees and Flowers was entirely written by Jill, with the song being about her agoraphobia, with lyrics like, "I hate the trees, and I hate the flowers." Go Away was written by Rose. It was about her cousin who would play nasty tricks on her. She would be visiting the country, and he would take her for a walk and leave her somewhere. He would tell her to sit on some wishing stones, close her eyes, count to 10, make a wish, and open her eyes. He would be nowhere to be seen. This stuck with her, and a lot of Rose's lyrics that she wrote are very story-like, creating a visual story, which her songs were all about memories and things from her life that stuck with her. I'm not entirely sure who wrote Spanish Song, which is also known as Don't Go, but it can be assumed it was Rose, since Jill was more about writing the music rather than the lyrics. And this song never got a proper recording. It was only on the 4-piece demo. And some other songs that they had written and would perform during their time as a 4-piece were By the Sea, which was re-recorded for the Since Yesterday B-side. Linda, which is also known as Let Her Go, which was a love song, which was about Rose's friend Linda that was mentioned earlier. This one was written by Rose, though it did eventually have a name change, and then it became Let Her Go from Linda. Dance, which was an earlier version of Since Yesterday, this was never released, and the only studio recording was the October 1982 BBC David Jensen session. First Prize, which was abandoned and the band never did a proper recording for. This song was dropped before they even became a 2-piece. Another one was Sandhills, which also was unreleased and never got a proper recording. Also, Jill was like saying, I think, I don't know if it's just the context of this specific recording that I listened to, or she genuinely just doesn't like the song First Prize, but if you listen to it, it's such a sweet song. I really like it. But I mean, I'm also really biased. Like, I don't think they have any bad music. Like, there's such a charm to when they were very new to it, because they still had so much talent, in my opinion, and it's just so cozy. And I really do prefer their older sound, and it sounds like they did too, which I'll get into more later. The poems would eventually fall apart, though, which was due to many circumstances, mainly with Strawberry Switchblade getting more popular and getting very busy. Rose wanted to continue with the poems, but Strawberry Switchblade just became her main priority, but also caring for her daughter. And Ian, the guitarist, left the band after getting married, so the band really just stood no chance of lasting. Now, though, as a two-piece, Strawberry Switchblade became a more serious endeavor for the girls. Everything happened very fast from here with the band's popularity, so stay tuned. This is about to go, like, real quick. It's gonna be, like, one after the other type of thing, because their boost of popularity happened really quick, and then the fall-off was, like, just as quick. Their success came very fast, and it was not hard for them at all, which in a sense caused them to never really face challenges together, and their working relationship was never really tested. And things just happened so fast that they did not have time to think about those types of things, or the problems that could later cause. And before they knew it, they were touring for 2 weeks with Orange Juice. They traveled from city to city, and venue to venue, in a hired car by Shahid Sarwar. Edwin from the band Orange Juice had been saying to people like John Peel, "Look out for Strawberry Switchblade!" Orange Juice was spreading their name for a bit, and then John Peel himself called Rose and said, "Do you want to do a session?" And Rose was asking things like, "Do you want me to send you a demo or anything?" And he was like, No, just come in. Which is crazy, because imagine how many demos he was getting from people, and he's just like, "No, I want this one," without even hearing them at all. He didn't hear them at all. He just wanted to instantly do it. And then, the next day, Kid Jensen's producer called and asked to do a session too. It was like there was a race between the two of them to see who would like discover them first. They did the John Peel session first, but the Kid Jensen session seems to have been played first. For these sessions, James Kirk from Orange Juice was on bass, while Shahid Sarwar from The Recognitions was on drums. Also, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that name right. After the sessions, everything moved very fast. They had David Balfe and Bill Drummond, I don't know how to say his name, coming up to sign them to management, and these sessions had been heard by Bill and David, and they signed the band to their publishing label, Zoo Music, which was in partnership with Warner Bros. David Balfe would become the band's manager since Bill was busy managing Echo and the Bunnymen mainly. Strawberry Switchblade's original sound was of course very acoustic and folky. Their 1982 demo is a very good example of this. It was like a very cozy sound, not obviously no synths, it was acoustic. When Warner came in though, everything changed. Their sound became more synth, there was pop, they were really utilizing the synths of that era, and Warner was trying to change them in a lot of ways, trying to water them down to a more mainstream audience with their appearance and their sound, because obviously they have punk origins, and they were kind of trying to water that down to a more mainstream audience, because, punk isn't mainstream, so they were trying to water them down, which, no one wants to be watered down like that. And the girls were in this for the fun, of course, so not the fame. And this began to cause a lot of issues as Warner began taking way too many creative liberties. Another issue the band would face was, of course, Jill's agoraphobia, which wasn't gone. It was still there. She still suffered from it. And this would interfere with a lot of things. This was something that was to be expected, but it was still a hurdle. There would be issues since there were many things that needed both of them, but Jill just couldn't go to due to her agoraphobia. It felt kind of like they reached a dead end, and the record company began changing their sound so much. The meetings with the record company were so stressful and would end in tears for both girls. In private, Rose and Jill would agree that they would tell the record company how they were feeling, but then in the meetings, Jill would often be too afraid to speak up. So it would be Rose alone speaking up for their current image, and sometimes Peter McArthur speaking up as well. And I believe Drew as well, but I couldn't find any info on that. The first single the band would release was Trees and Flowers in July of 1983. This was released through 92 Happy Customers. This was an independent record label run by Will Sergeant from Echo and the Bunnymen. It sold over 10,000 copies, and it was featured in John Peel's 1983 Festive 50 at number 47. It featured Roddy Frame of Aztec Camera on guitar and was produced by Bill Drummond. Trees and Flowers was acoustic with oboes and French horn, being the preferred route of the girls, of course, since they didn't want to go down the synthy path. The record company set them up with David Motion, though, which was different. And they found themselves going in the more synth pop direction. And having $250,000 going into this album, they were kind of stuck with this since they couldn't change it now. Before going with David Motion, though, they did do a session with Robin Millar, where they recorded Secrets and Poor Hearts. This was never officially released since they decided to go with David Motion instead, since the record company wanted to go in a more poppy direction. I personally do really like this session, though. I think it just sounded really nice. I just prefer their more natural sound personally. Like, I used to, of course, when I first listened to them, I listened to them with their poppy stuff first because I didn't know their other stuff. But then when I heard their other stuff, there's just this special charm to it that I really love. But that's not to say I don't love the synth pop direction too. I just think both are so amazing. It's just, there's a lot of what could have beens. But they definitely did have an influence in music, so it's just interesting to think about, I guess. David Motion had been suggested by Balfe's girlfriend at the time, Jean Mulhern, who also has writing credit on the song Black Taxi, my favorite Strawberry Switchblade song. In the summer of 1983, Rose, Drew, Jill, and Peter all moved to London, to an apartment in Muswell Hill. Rose lived on the ground floor while Jill lived above her. They had to move from Glasgow because the traveling became too much, especially with Jill's agoraphobia. The move from Glasgow to London, though, was truly the sign of the end times for the band, as Rose and Drew split off into very different social circles than Jill and Peter. Rose and Drew began hanging out with people like Genesis P. Orridge and some other people who have problematic backgrounds, and this would set them further apart. In 1983, Strawberry Switchblade made a guest appearance on a song by the Pastels called I Wonder Why, and on its B-side, Supposed to Understand. These are both very good. I found them, I listened to them, they're so good. Listen to them.
I wonder why it gets so scared. I wonder when I'm going to die. I wonder why, 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 I wonder why. With me, and I wish we were together. Then we could love forever. Oh, is it true?
I really like I Wonder Why especially, but so good. I just love anything that involves Strawberry Switchblade. So good! Rose had a stalker not long after they moved to Muswell Hill. Rose got letters from a man saying that he was suicidal and that he loved Strawberry Switchblade. He moved somewhere called Roseberry Avenue, and he'd said that he'd been following her for a year. Rose became very paranoid after this. One day when she was pushing her bike with her 5-year-old daughter, Carrie, she heard Since Yesterday playing on a Walkman behind her. She reluctantly looked behind her and saw a man who ended up being Kelvin, the person writing those letters. Rose told him off, telling him to never follow her with her daughter again. One time, she stepped out of a cab by accident and Kelvin jumped out in front of the car with her, not to push her out of the way, but because he wanted to die with her. He even bought the same car that she had. And this went on until she left Muswell Hill, so about 6 years. Rose was diagnosed with manic depression not long after that. In November of 1984, they released their second single, Since Yesterday. This poppy, upbeat song that most would assume was just a simple little love song, Rose would later reveal was actually about nuclear war, the Cold War. And lyrics such like, "And as we sit here alone, looking for a reason to go on, it's so clear that all we have now are our thoughts of yesterday." Has a little different meaning when you look at it at that angle. The lyrics are quite dark, which would be intertwined with their image since it's such a poppy, sweet sound, such dark and depressing lyrics match their name perfectly. This name also perfectly matched the duo, with Rose being the Switchblade and Jill being the Strawberry. There was a major debate about when to release this single since releasing it in November would be risky, but they did it anyway. They were competing with Michael Jackson and all of the people who sell around Christmas time. It went up and down in the charts for 3 months before it ended up hitting the top 5. There was a TV advertising campaign for it from Christmas to New Year's. The list of issues that were to come would be endless though, with things like people caring more about their image than their music, and not taking their music or them seriously, as they were just seen as two girls who dressed eccentrically and make vapid pop music, which was far from the truth. People just didn't see their depth. Another issue that would begin to arise was that Rose would assume leadership, being the lead singer, in a sense that she was acting like it was her band rather than their band. It became me rather than we. Rose would try to take more credit, and this would become an issue. The band was always a group effort, and sadly it seemed Rose was trying to rewrite that fact. The fame may have gotten to her a little bit, and this created such a very stressful working environment for Jill, who was a peacemaker. And then, of course, Jill's agoraphobia was still an issue. She didn't stop battling with it. Since Yesterday, though, quickly was a hit. It became a UK top 5 hit, peaking at number 5, and the average time for a song to stay in the British charts was only about 10 weeks. But Since Yesterday remained there for around 20, which is double that. The song became a hit all around Europe, and also in Japan, which more on that later. And they're the only Scottish girl band to ever break the top 5, let alone the top 30. Crazy, when you think about it. The opening fanfare from the song came from the third movement of Sibyllus's Symphony No. 5, which neither Rose nor Jill were aware of. This was done by David Motion. And then some random little facts is that Jill had 3 cats, and Rose had one, which was a white girl cat named Mr. Greedy, which was a blind cat actually. Just sweet little facts. Just to look back that the band was really sweet and happy, but there was a lot of bad aspects when you look back on it. And things are very complicated, which I will be getting into more. But let's talk more about just Since Yesterday and how happy the girls were about it. Jill and Rose were both so excited about them being in a top 5 hit. They were just so excited, laughing, excited, having fun, feeling like a pair of little kids. They were in their glory. And they began making every TV appearance possible. People of all ages loved them for their unique style and their music. The issue was, though, that their relationship had entered a bit of a Cold War phase. They were not working together and creating, they would be writing apart. They were able to act friendly in interviews, and nobody would ever be able to guess that there was issues going on in private between the two of them. On TV, they would be all friendly, but then, the moment that they were in private, they would say nothing to one another. By late 1984, the relationship between Jill and Peter had also become different. After 6 to 7 years, they were no longer a couple in a real sense. Instead, they were more like brother and sister. But they did not separate due to them both struggling with money and Jill's agoraphobia. Jill would always see Peter as her security blanket due to her agoraphobia, and she would rely on him a lot. Jill would insist Peter go with her everywhere, which eventually would cause Balfi to force Jill to be more independent. One time Jill was in tears at Heathrow Airport because she refused to go to Japan without Peter. While Balfe was screaming that their career was over, crazily, a young fan was standing patiently and unfazed by all of this. They were just waiting there for an autograph patiently. They would sometimes need to bribe Jill to even leave the house. Before they went to Japan, Jill was given Valium. Her agoraphobia had gotten so bad that she was doing everything that she could to push through it. She was going to hypnotists, listening to meditation tapes, but nothing was working. Since Yesterday had entered the charts at 89, and it's, of course, within 3 months it peaked at number 5 in the UK charts. Once they got to do a promotional video for Since Yesterday, they wanted to work with Tim Pope, who did videos for The Cure and the Psychedelic Furs. They made the dresses for the video, and they even had removable polka dots on them, which took forever, and they hardly ended up being visible in the final video. But they loved working with Tim Pope, and the video was released in October of 1984 with the single. And Since Yesterday was their biggest hit, and the period after Since Yesterday was very hectic. They now had an album to promote, and they were busy as they could be, never having time to fix the internal problems that they were facing between them. Instead of focusing on fixing their relationship, Rose and Jill would be busy doing radio, TV, interviews, and gigs. The interviews would quickly become boring and repetitive, as they would care far more about their way that they dressed rather than their music and their lyrics, and who they were even as people. Rose would get so bored of the interviews that she would just make up funny stories that the interviews would print, and they would just take her seriously, leaving her embarrassed in the end. One time she lied about her and Jill mud wrestling and showering together, and they printed it. Jill and Rose were mortified after this, especially Rose. And when they went to Japan, they met Ryuichi Sakamoto, the head of Warner Bros. Japan, and he was interested in producing their second album. And the thing was with this, though, they would need to relocate to Japan for 2 months if they accepted his offer. So they declined due to Jill's agoraphobia. And I do want to mention one thing that Rose said here that is very icky, and I just cannot ignore. This is inexcusable. Like, I know this is the 80s, but still. She asked Ryuichi Sakamoto if he had ever eaten a dog before. This is such poor taste. I don't care if it was meant to be a joke. It's just, looking back, it is very icky. And another thing is, in another interview, she further said that she often said things that could be inappropriate, but then she proceeded to say after this, at the end of her sentence, "But the Japanese do eat dogs." What the fuck? No. I read this and I was disgusted. I don't think I need to explain why this is wrong. I'm sorry, like, I'm not apologizing, but like this is not my place to forgive. I'm a white woman. This is just, no. Girl, why would you say that? Like, I know that stuff is more normalized back then, but it's just really icky, really gross. And I really needed to mention that. I can't ignore that, because when I read that. Anyways, their cover of Sunday Morning by the Velvet Underground would be released as an extra track on the 12-inch of Since Yesterday. This was never included on any of their albums, though, and it is not available on Spotify, but it can be found on YouTube, and it is so good. Please go listen to it. I love it. And then in February of 1985, they did another John Peel session with songs that would have been on their second album. These songs were Cut with the Cake Knife, Nothing Changes, 60 Cowboys, and Life's Full of Wonders, which is one of my favorite Strawberry Switchblade songs ever. It's so good. If you're gonna listen to any Strawberry Switchblade song after this, make it that one. So good. And even one time, Rose didn't like the beginning of a song so much when they were recording it that she was staring at the tape and was setting it on fire in her mind. Because I don't know if I mentioned this, but Rose has always had an interest in witchcrafts and magic. So that's something to keep in mind. And the song that she did this for was Let Her Go. She was staring at the tape and it actually began smoking and set on fire. She did not tell anyone until everyone could smell it. And then their next single would be released in March of 1985, which was Let Her Go. aka Linda from before. Then they released a promotional video for the song, which was again directed by Tim Pope. The Switchblade album was recorded in a few different studios rather than doing it in just one studio and recording it all. The album took around 6 weeks. The Strawberry Switchblade album was produced by David Motion except for the songs Who Knows What Love Is and Let Her Go, which were produced by Phil Thornley, best known for his work with The Cure. Crossover between my two favorite bands, even though obviously Tim Pope was already mentioned. There were certain songs that they weren't sure about, so that's where Phil Thornley came in. They had already recorded Who Knows What Love Is with David Motion, but they did it again with Phil. Most of their original songs did end up on the final album, though they did go through changes with chords and lyrics, but that was really all. And then their self-titled album was released on April 5th of 1985. So the songs on the album were, for side one the first one was Since Yesterday, the second one was Deep Water, the third one was Another Day, the fourth was Little River, and then it was 10 James Orr Street. And then side 2 had track number 6 was Let Her Go, 7 was Who Knows What Love Is, 8th was Go Away, and then it was Secrets, 10 was Who Knows What Love Is, the reprise, and then 11 was Being Cold. And then despite all the songs being said to be written by Rose and Jill, Michael Who Walks by Night was written entirely by Jill. Little River was a storybook Rose liked when she was a little girl in school. And that's like just some little facts about some of the songs. It is hard to like obviously find what all the songs are about. But yeah. Like for instance, like if I were to go into like details on like all of the tracks, which if you haven't listened to the album, you really should. It is on like I think pretty much every streaming platform. My personal favorite out of like the original like set of songs is probably 10 James Orr Street, which I mentioned what that song was about earlier. It's just so good. And I also love Michael Who Walks by Night. I really wish that we had gotten to hear more of Jill's vocals in the band, because I think Jill also had a really good voice. And also the harmonies that they created in all their songs are so beautiful. But yeah, there was a large gap between the album and the original sessions. But it hardly felt very long since the girls were so busy throughout those years. They moved to London in 1983, and then from there they were constantly doing gigs and recording. But disappointingly, the album did not live up to the same success Since Yesterday did. The album entered and peaked at number 25 on the UK album chart in April of 1985, but it dropped out of the top 40 after only 2 weeks, and it spent only another 2 weeks in the lower reaches of the charts. Following the release of the album in May of 1985, they then released Who Knows What Love Is. They also released a promotional video with it that was again produced by Tim Pope, but this was the last video of theirs that Tim Pope would produce. And then, in September of 1985, their 5th single was released in the UK and Japan. It was an electro-pop cover of Jolene by Dolly Parton. This cover was suggested by Peter McArthur, who played it off as Rose's idea, since that was often the only way to really get an idea to go through. The girls loved their video director Tim Pope, but then suddenly the record company began saying, "It's time for a change, girls!" And the compromises that they were making became more and more hard to deal with. And the end was near. These issues were just getting worse and worse and causing bigger rifts between the two until they began reaching a boiling point. The Jolene era marked the end of the band, with all the compromises that were being made. Jolene was produced by Clive Langer, who hated women. He didn't even talk to Rose and Jill. His engineer did most of the work, and he just put his name on it. And then the Jolene promotional video ended up being produced by someone other than Tim Pope, and it just wasn't what the girls had in mind in the beginning. And then in 1985, they also provided vocals for An Alien Funeral Procession in Rigel 9, a space opera, which was a project by David Bedford and Ursula K. Le Guin. David Bedford did the string and woodwind arrangements on the Strawberry Switchblade album. Around this time, Rose and Drew ended up splitting. Jill and Peter were still living together, as they could not afford to live apart, Despite Strawberry Switchblade's success, they couldn't even afford the electricity bill sometimes. Around this time, Jill and Balfe ended up having an affair, which Peter did not mind at all, as their relationship was already not very romantic at this point at all. It was more like they were brother and sister, as mentioned earlier. There was then a strange dead-end period before the air cleared. It seemed Rose had become more relaxed. They were working on writing songs for their second album during this time, and then this is where things get confusing. I'm unsure if it was Rose or Jill who ultimately decided that it was time to split the band, but by the sounds of it, Rose was saying, what was the point? And then Jill was like, let's just split the band up. It was just so stressful towards the end, and they weren't getting any enjoyment out of it anymore. The record company was just money hungry. They didn't care about the music. They just wanted money to be made. The girls were so unhappy at this point. There was no way that they were going to last. The end was inevitable, and it's really sad how soon it came, but it was inevitable in the end. In Japan, though, the group was especially popular. Their unique image and sound simply was a perfect fit for the Japanese market at the time. To this day, the band remains iconic there, and it is well remembered. They were very influential in the Japanese music and fashion scene. Many people, as said earlier, think that they may have helped to inspire the gothic Lolita style of fashion. The Japanese dark wave band Velvet Eden even dressed up as them before. Many covers of Since Yesterday exist from Japanese artists like Tommy February 6, and there were even fan bands. Like, they were just so popular there. They were just popping off. And like, looking at their image, like, it really does make sense, because if you're into a lot of like Japanese fashion and music, like, you'll definitely understand it. I mean, I personally always have been. I was into that stuff before I even knew Strawberry Switchblade, so that's why I was so interested when I found out there was a correlation, because I found them out because of like my love for new wave, like 3 years ago. But yeah, it's just interesting. But their success was dying down in the UK, but they remained very popular in Japan, of course. Before the split, they released 2 singles that were only issued in Japan, which were Ecstasy, also known as Apple in My Eye. This was for a Japanese Subaru car commercial, and the lyrics were sent to them, and Rose hated the lyrics and refused to sing them, so instead she rewrote them about the drug ecstasy that she was taking at the time. And both Rose and Jill hated this song. Jill did not play or sing on this track at all. Balfe made them do it for the money, of course. And they also did a Wella hair advert for the radio, which again was for the money, but I couldn't find any info on this besides that Janice Long did the voiceover, and it was for Shockwave's hairspray. Like, I would love to hear this, but I think that's like one of the only things I couldn't find about like their music. Like, most of it is like available to find, but I couldn't find that, and then I couldn't find, I believe it's called Lost in Space, which is apparently a song, but I think it went through a name change, so I don't know what that is. Those are like the only things like I couldn't find anything about. But yeah, the other song that they released in Japan and would be their final single that they would ever release was I Can Feel, which was originally titled Honeybee, I believe, if I remember correctly. But this song likely would have been very different if it was on their second album, but they rushed to release it in Japan, and then the split happened. The demo is the one available on streaming services, but I do prefer the one that was released. But I don't think Rose or Jill like that one very much either. But I Can Feel only featured Rose at all because this was when the band had begun like splitting, which was due to, of course, the stress and the pressure, and Rose's diva side was coming out. There was just no mutual respect between the two of them at this point. They were writing separately, and it was so draining for Jill. She wanted to work with Rose and not do it all alone. And Jill, towards the end, had always just been sitting there thinking how much she hated all of it. And for like songs, it would be like she was thinking about how much she hated it, and then Rose would just be recording the song. Jill would not be playing on those Japanese tracks, not providing backing vocals, and they got pretty far into production for their second album. And their next single was going to be called Cut with the Cake Knife, but then sadly the breakup came, and that messed everything up. That's when the band ended, and yeah, that's the end of Strawberry Switchblade. Now we get into what happened after the band split. So, Rose went off after this to her own group that she had already been hanging out with, which she was getting into some darker things. She wrote a song called Crystal Nights, which is said to be about, which was a horrific night in November of 1938 when many Jewish homes and businesses were destroyed by Nazis. I have listened to the song. I'll explain more of her music later, but like none of her songs have any like, looking at the lyrics, it doesn't sound like they're about that stuff at all. So I don't know if, because Jill's the one that said that's what it was about. I don't know if that's just a coincidence or what. Because like looking at the lyrics, to me, I don't hear it. But I don't know. It's interesting. But yeah, Rose was just not aligning with Jill's values towards the end, which again contributed to the split. Jill didn't see a point in doing it anymore and had decided the band needed to split. The relationship was so strained, and Rose just took the news of the split calmly. And the issue that came with the split, though, was the fact that they did not have much money. Despite being famous pop stars, they did not have much money. And now they owed very much money, and Balfe wanted that money back. He came for that money. Rose approached Warner with some solo work, but they just weren't interested. Rose expressed regret in a sense to Peter, asking, "Do you think Jill blames me for all of this?" And this was a really sad ending to the band. But again, it was inevitable. Peter McArthur stated that Rose began seeing a man named Robert Lee who had a swastika medal next to his chest, and Rose would later marry this man. Yeah, yikes. Jill was left to sort out the financial mess left by the band and the subsequent court cases. This went on for years, and Peter and Jill split in 1988, and then Jill moved out. And one final thing about the split, which I know I mentioned a lot, but in truth, like, they were two girls which also contributed to it. No one was taking them seriously, and they were just being pushed down this road of stereotypes of what kind of music women should be making. And money was all they cared about, when the girls just wanted to make music. So yeah, that's how the band ended. But now I do have to mention something. I have to mention something I didn't want to talk about, but I know that I have to. And this was like really convoluted for me to research. So I don't know. I'm just gonna state the facts, which are that Jill claims Rose had Nazi memorabilia. She said Rose had a large Nazi flag in her daughter's room, but Rose denies this entirely. She said this did not happen. She did not have this hung up. And then Jill claims Rose and Drew bought a Nazi dagger as well, but then Rose later clarified this was a birthday gift from a friend, which was for rituals because of her use of magic since she is pagan. But Rose did have an interest in World War II. So she says that this was because her grandfather fought in it, and she thinks while Hitler was very interesting, he was absolutely insane and his logic made no sense, and her family would have been persecuted too. To say Romani. The thing is, though, Rose has associations with some problematic individuals, which make it very hard to believe that she never had problematic beliefs. Though it is to be kept in mind that she grew up with a lack of education, of course, due to like where she grew up. Like, she wasn't educated the same way a lot of other people would have been. So that is something to keep in mind, though not an excuse. It seems like she just got into the wrong crowd of people, and that she isn't a bad person, at least like from what I've seen. Like, it seems like just very uneducated and a bit naive in a lot of ways, and times have changed. Not an excuse, but just to help kind of understand. Like, I looked at her Facebook, and like pretty recently Rose posted on her Facebook about how if you're racist or bigoted of any kind, she will block you. So it's just something to like, you know, I don't think she's a bad person from what I can tell. especially since, like, the thing about punk is there was a lot of problematic imagery used with, like, Nazi symbols and stuff, which were used for shock value. If you know, like, about, like, the Sex Pistols and stuff, and honestly, even Susie Sue wore a, Nazi armband, if you didn't know that. So, there's just a lot of imagery that was used. Doesn't make it any less problematic. I'm not denying that. It's very problematic. If you're a Nazi, by the way, you're not punk. Sorry, I have to mention that. You're not punk, you're not goth. Directly a contradiction. So, just stuff to think about. But all of the people that Rose spent her time with were controversial, though she claims that they weren't Nazis or anything of that sort, and that they were all nice people. But some other people say otherwise. Rose is in an interesting situation since she had such a rough upbringing, and it seems like she more so just got with the wrong crowd. And, like, for instance, Rose says Boyd Rice never said anything racist around her, and that she always asked him because she did not want to be around that kind of sort of thing. So that's something to think about. Because, like, some of the people that Rose spent her time with were Boyd Rice, Genesis P. Orridge, like Coil. I'm trying to think of who else. There's someone else I'm thinking of. Oh, all the Death in June stuff. I'll get into that in a little bit. If you know that band, you know where I'm going with this. But let's get on to what Jill did after the band. In late 1986, directly after the band split, Jill recorded a few demos with Robin Brown. He did backing vocals and some other instrumental stuff. Jill also did a few gigs, but that was all she did musically until 2013. The songs that were on this demo were Saint Centurion Close, and then Dust Index, 3 Days, Taxi, Daddy I'll Drown, Always, Meaning of Your Smile, which is my favorite, it's so good, Dark 7, which was written by Jill entirely, which was the only one that was written by Jill entirely. The other ones had help by Robin Brown, and Dark 7 was originally written to be a Strawberry Switchblade song. Nothing Changes, which was on the 1985 Peel session. So I'm assuming that one was already also written by Jill, but I don't know. Miss Me. So those were the songs that she recorded. I found them available on YouTube to listen to, and they're all really good. You should give them a listen. Like, I love Jill's voice, and I wish we got to hear more of it during the band, because her voice is so beautiful and soft, and I love it. Like, both Rose and Jill have such different voices, but they're both so beautiful, and, like, their harmonies were chef's kiss, amazing. After Strawberry Switchblade, though, it became hard for Jill to continue making music, and not long after, she got married and had her daughter. Jill wanted to return to her first love, which was art, and since quitting music, Jill continued to work in the mixed media style that she did in art school. So that's all she did for a long time, like, just art. To return back to what her passion was. But in 2013, Jill made her return to music after almost 30 years, with the band The Shapists, which featured her daughter, Jessie Frost. Their first song as The Shapists was Change Your Mind, and then the second was King of the World, and then it was In My Head, and then the fourth was The Warning, and then Dust Index, which was one of her demos, had a new recording in 2013 as their fifth song, and then their sixth song was White Horses, their seventh was a new recording of Trees and Flowers, and then their last one was a re-recording of Daddy I'll Drown in 2014 as their eighth single. And besides The Shapists, Jill lives a happy life as an artist, and you can support The Shapists by buying their new vinyl. And also, Jill has an Instagram and a Pinterest. Those are the only ones I could find, but I really recommend supporting her. She's unproblematic and I adore her. So, like, I actually have, like, mutuals by the way that I've met her, and she's so sweet, I heard. To meet either of them would be a dream for me, but I'm going to get onto more about Rose after the band now. So, immediately after the split, Rose did 2 gigs under the Strawberry Switchblade name with a different band. And her first gig after the split, she took a tab of acid before going on stage and said she had the best performance of her life. This was the first show after the split, of course, and she was just shocked and remembered all the songs, and she kept staring at the moon, being more concerned, oh my gosh, the moon came to my gig! Which is really cute, honestly, as someone who really loves celestial stuff, and I find magic really interesting, even though I'm not personally pagan, so I love hearing about people who are, so it's interesting. But it did become convoluted since Jill didn't want her using the name Strawberry Switchblade since that was associated with her and Jill. So Rose only did 2 gigs before stopping this, and then after the split, Rose became a floating band member or a guest vocalist for many different bands, especially in the neo-colonial genre. She contributed vocals to Coil, Current 93, Death in June, Belt, Alex Ferguson, Into a Circle, Megas, Nature and Organization, Ornamental, Boyd Rice, Psychic TV, and Nurse with Wound. Rose began recording a solo album that was called The Sunshine Demos. The album was composed right after the split of Strawberry Switchblade in 1986. The album was recorded in multiple sessions between London and Iceland. The lineup for the recording was, I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, I'm going to just put it on screen because I'm not Icelandic. I can't say that. Paul Hampshire, aka B, and Barry Jepsen, among others. Rose met Bjork. You guys know Bjork. And I don't know how to say these names. So I'm just gonna put this here. Through Icelandic composer Hilmar Orn Hilmarsson. I'm not even sure if that's right, but I don't want to keep putting them on screen instead of saying them. And he worked with David Tibet and was in a lineup of Psychic TV alongside Rose and Soft Cell's Dave Ball. When Strawberry Switchblade was still at the height of their smash hits dominating success from Since Yesterday, just gonna put that name here again, was among the support acts. Ornamental featured Rose, Dave Ball, Hilmar Orn Hilmarsson, Einar Orn Benediktsson, and this was not long after the split of Switchblade. It was Rose who introduced Hilmar to Current 93's David Tibet, and then Rose and Bjork sang together on the album. The ornamental version of Crystal Nights was written by Rose while in Iceland and would be released in demo form as their B-side to her cover of Don't Fear the Reaper by Blue Oyster Cult, which is so good. I prefer it to the original personally. Rose hasn't kept in contact with Bjork, but she does wish to get back in touch. She even commented on her Facebook, which I'll insert a picture of. She was meant to go on tour with Bjork, but one of Rose's best friends killed himself during that time, so she was very broken. Bjork even proposed to her. You heard me right. She would have been Miss McDowall. Missed opportunity. Also, Rose McDowall bisexual? Confirmed? I don't know, but interesting. Rose said yes to this proposal. I don't know if I mentioned that. But again, nothing ever happened from this since after Rose's friend died, she was just so struck with grief that she went home. She had been doing though the ornamental stuff in Iceland, and that's where she wrote Soldier, which is another one of her songs. The reason that her and Bjork got along so well was that they were both very childish spirits, and yeah, Bjork proposed to her in Hilmar's garden where Rose had said yes and then had to go home. I'm not gonna even try to pronounce this. But it was released in May of 1988 by Icelandic singer Megas. It was, I don't know if I'm saying that right. I'm not Icelandic, I'm so sorry. It was released through Graham and featured Bjork and Rose McDowall as background vocalists. I can't say this name. On guitar. I listened to her performance and it was really interesting. I love hearing like very interesting music, so if you can find the performance, you should give it a listen. I mean, I can probably insert it right here. Rose eventually began cutting herself and just playing with death, seeing if she would die or not. And she became very depressed after the death of her friend. And she blamed herself for all of it. So sad. But as someone who suffers from depression, I know how that is. It's not fun. Having depression is horrible. But yeah, Rose met Coil through David Tibet, and she met Genesis P through B, aka Paul Hampshire. This is from earlier, but like, at least helps you like understand like how she met these people, because this was with her husband Drew at the time, like when she was still in Switchblade. Rose met David Tibet and then met Douglas through him. And then Rose began working on Spell, which was a project she did with Boyd Rice. The album was released in 1993, and there was a second album prepared, but it never happened since Boyd and her ex-husband fell out, and her ex-husband produced the first album, so Boyd didn't want to work with him. Most of the album was recorded together in her home studio, Velvet Hole, and this was a cover band that covered 60s music. It's really good music. You should give it a listen, though. Boyd Rice, I think, is pretty problematic. Like, it is so hard to find, like, information about these people just because of, like, there's so many, like, teetering lines with what is shock value and what isn't. All I can really say is, like, if you're a Nazi of any kind, you suck. I hate you. Like, I've, like, found is that there's actually, like, people who claim to be Strawberry Switchblade fans, and they only like them because of Rose's associations with, like, Nazi people. Disgusting. Sorry, I just had to mention that. Disgusting. So, at the same time as Spell, Rose began working on Sorrow with her ex-husband Robert Lee, who was mentioned earlier with the swastika. They would release 2 albums and 1 EP between 1993 and 2001. Rose prefers Sorrow to Switchblades because she likes to use her voice more as an instrument rather than singing words like in succession. When Rose was working on Love's Secret Domain with Coil, she was paid in currency with ecstasy, which she took in the studio while recording together. It was more about working with friends rather than the money for her. Sorrow eventually became defunct since there was no point in keeping the name since she and her ex-husband Robert were no longer together. And in September of 2015, the cut with the Cake Knife aka Sunshine demos were reissued through Night School Records. The songs on this were Tibet, which was about David Tibet, and it's my personal favorite. It's like so sunshine. I love it. Sunboy, I love that song. I love all these songs. Wings of Heaven, 60 Cowboys, which was on the 1985 John Peel session. On the Sun, Cut with the Cake Knife, which was supposed to be a Strawberry Switchblade song, aka their next single. Crystal Nights, which might be about massacre. Crazy. Soldier, So Vicious, cover of Don't Fear the Reaper. So good. I prefer it to the original, I'm sorry. And Crystal Days. I love every song on this, and I want to get the vinyl. I also want to mention that there is a strawberry shaped vinyl, and I would do anything for it. I would spend hundreds of dollars. I'm desperate. It's literally so cool. Look at it. I need it. Every Strawberry Switchblade fan needs one. Like, I want all the vinyls. They're my special interest. Anyways, continuing. Rose stopped doing magic when she had her other kids because she was worried about spirits since they were young and defenseless. Rose had 3 children, which were Carrie, Bobby, and Velocity. Carrie was her oldest, and then she had her son Bobby next at 11 years younger, and then lastly was her daughter 6 years younger than Bobby, which was Velocity, and Carrie is her only child who is not very musical. Rose also did music for the film Far from the Apple Tree, which I want to watch. I might make my boyfriend watch it with me. I'll force him. Van, you're gonna have to watch that with me. Anyway, this was directed by Grant McPhee, and she worked with Sean Pinchbeck on the music in 2019. So that is all her musical endeavors, though it is hard to mention everything just because Rose has done so much in terms of music, especially in the neo-folk scene. I do want to mention, though, like, she has just worked with, like, a lot of, like, problematic bands, like Death in June. There is so much Nazi imagery, it's hard not to consider them problematic. Like, I'm not trying to, like, seem like everything in the world is problematic, but it's just really hard not to, just because, like, how much Nazi associations there is. I love Strawberry Switchblade with my entire being, and I love the music that Rose has made, and I don't think that she's a bad person, I don't think. But her associations with certain people are just a bit concerning. So yeah, that's just what I wanted to, like, say about that. Yeah, because I noticed some people were, like, trying to, like, say that Strawberry Switchblade is problematic. They're not. Like, I don't want people thinking that. Because, like, I love them with my entire being, okay? And also, there comes a point where you can separate art from artists, and I think a lot of people forget that. Like, it's different, obviously, if the art is about victims, but it's not. So, yeah, it's just... I think a lot of people see things very black and white rather than shades of gray. But I'm not going to get into that, because I could go on and on. But Yeah, that's pretty much all about their lives as of now. I want to mention another thing, but first I just want to say that you could, if you want to support anything that Rose and Jill have done, you can get a vinyl from the Shapists to support Jill. And you can get a vinyl for Don't Fear the Reaper to support, or is it Cut with the Cake Knife? Cut with the Cake Knife, I'm sorry. Cut with the Cake Knife to support Rose. I want to get both, because I want to get a vinyl collection, especially with the strawberry vinyl, though. Please, please, please. But I want to mention another thing. In 2024, there was a documentary released titled Since Yesterday, The Untold Stories of Scottish Girl Bands, that was released. Rose and Jill would reunite at the premiere of this movie on October 19th, 2024 in Glasgow. It was so great to see that they don't hate each other, because there's definitely been a lot of convoluted stuff that makes it seem like Jill and Rose weren't on good terms, so it's really nice to see that they don't hate each other, since I love this band so much, and I have a mutual that met them, and I'm so jealous. So jealous. I want to meet them so bad. If they saw this, hi, I love you so much, and you mean the world to me, and you saved my life, because I had a really rough last couple years, and your music means the world to me. So yeah, if you're watching this, either of you, Rose or Jill. But yeah, this video has been a major passion project for me. They've been my favorite band since like 2021, 2022, and they're just a huge comfort for me, and they're one of my main hyperfixations. My boyfriend actually jumped into my DMs through one of my Strawberry Switchblade stories, and that's how we started talking. I love my boyfriend. But yeah, that's about all I have to really say. I think I've mentioned everything that I know about them. Oh, I probably know more, but that's just all I can think of off the top of my head. So yeah, that's everything about Strawberry Switchblade. Since you came this far, if you want to see my qualifications, I'm gonna show you every Strawberry Switchblade inspired look I've ever done. And I also entered a costume contest last Halloween with my best friend, and we dressed as Rose and Jill. I am a super fan. I'm probably their biggest fan, and I probably know more about them than like anyone else. Though maybe I'm wrong. I don't have the qualifications to say for sure. It's just I adore them. And I'm going to give you a final look at my outfits, and then it's going to be time for me to go. So this is the fit one last time. I was going for like that cupcake skirt Lolita vibe, of course, because that's like their whole look. With the hair, the makeup, which I have really watery eyes, so they're not really nice anymore. But yeah, that's all I really have to say. And I just want to say one more time how much I love this band. And thank you so much for coming this far and watching all this. This is a passion project for me, so I want you to understand how much it means for you to watch all of this. And I again want to say I can't promise everything is accurate. I tried my absolute best. I fact check everything to the best of my abilities. But there is just so much. So thank you so much for watching all of this. I really appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. And I'm hoping to post more in the future. So if you're interested, please like, comment, and subscribe. And that's really all I have to say. So bye. Keep switchblading.